This is my microphone. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is a quick test of the stream going to you prior to our live moment. Welcome to the 2024 Australasian Aid Conference. Check, 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 check. Yeah. So I can monitor it from one of my laptops? Yeah.
So I can hear the audience now. So, oh, that's just the. Okay, so can we send music out there? That wasn't live.
I'll send this microphone down that stream right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So can we just put music then?
Oh, you want music on it now? Cool.
Hello, everyone. Could I get everybody to move to their seats, please? Got a couple more coming in. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the soft launch of the Australasian Aid Conference 2024. Today's not the formal opening of the conference. Today is our series of pre-conference events, but we're really glad you could join us. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm not going to spend too long here today. You'll hear more from me tomorrow. Just wanted to say a couple of things about today. We'll have this event on transparency. There'll be an afternoon tea break. We've got a couple more launches in a couple of rooms, and then a final launch in here. And then we'd love you to join us for our opening reception this evening, where we'll be having a formal welcome to country from Auntie Serena Williams. So yeah, we do hope you can stick around for the afternoon and that you can join us for the welcome to country. Now, we do know it's a little warm, and we're talking to the central area that deals with warmth and coolness, and they are telling us that they're monitoring it. So anyway, there you go. But yeah, enough from me. We're going to turn over to our first launch panel today. It's a preview demonstration, and it's going to be very exciting. So I'm going to hand you over to the chair of that panel, Joanne Choe. Joe, thanks.
Afternoon, everyone. We have a very exciting launch to kick off the AAC this year. We're talking about transparency. So I think we've had a lot of conversations in this room and outside this room about transparency related to the development program, why it's important, why we need it, how we want to see it. And it was a central part of Australian government's international development policy, and there was a commitment to a transparency portal. So we're very excited to be at the launch of this portal today and hear all about how it's going to work. So the way we're going to run this is we're going to hear from Gill. She's the Assistant Secretary of the Development Strategy Branch of DFAT, ably supported by her colleagues, including Anna Gilchrist, Director of the Development Governance and Performance Section. They're going to show us how the portal works, and then we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. We're going to hear from Dr. Terence Wood, also known as Iced Tea, I understand, who will be talking about the key ingredients of transparency. We're going to be hearing from Leah Odongo, Head of Effectiveness at CBM and a member of ACFID's Code of Conduct Committee, on her perspectives on transparency. Then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion and then open it up for Q&A. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kath. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. Is this working? Excellent. I join, I think, Cam in acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on. I first wanted to say, this is, Cam just mentioned, speaking to the gods that manage the warmth of the room. We've had a few words with the gods that manage internet connectivity, and we're really hoping that at some point, very, very soon, we're actually going to show you what our new transparency portal looks like. So anyway, we'll say a few words, but I know that that's probably the thing that's going to interest you most. So firstly, as many of you know, the Australian government has made some very strong commitments to transparency and accountability in our new international development policy. We need to stop calling it new, it is over a year old. And there's a really strong emphasis for those of you who have read that policy on the way we work. So obviously it's about impact, very importantly, it's about getting development results, but we really want to work in ways with our development partners, including our government partners, our civil society partners, and a lot of our delivery partners, in ways that are very respectful, true partnerships, and core to that is transparency and accountability. So the government made a range of transparency commitments, and you will have seen some of that flowing out already. There's very importantly the performance of Australian Development Cooperation. The inaugural annual performance report was released, I think I'm looking at Anna, in April. Which was great. You'll be seeing development partnership plans are starting to be published on our website. They're a really core part of transparency. But then there were two initiatives that were really key, and one was that we would recommence reporting to the International Aid Transparency Initiative, IARTI, which is an important global sort of standard where Australia has more recently, when we paused reporting, not fared well in terms of our ranking, and the government was really strongly committed to lifting that ranking through recommencing reporting to IARTI. And the other thing was a commitment to develop an online transparency portal, which is obviously why we're here today. Collectively, all of those commitments come together to sort of build trust in the development program, and that's trust with all of our development partners and the public and Parliament, demonstrate value of the program and really tell a story about the impact that we're having. And I wanted to acknowledge, firstly, many in the room today that were really critical in our engagement on the international development policy in really making the case for transparency and articulating why it mattered to you, why it should matter to government and to the public. And that advocacy, I think, was really instrumental in getting those strong commitments from government. So thank you, including colleagues here on the panel who have been like really strong advocates for that. So today, we're very excited to, we thought we might be doing a preview demonstration, but this is essentially now formally going to be launching. We expect straight after this session, the Minister Conroy, our Minister for International Development and Pacific, will officially launch the portal. We have today also officially recommenced reporting to IARTI. So, you know, the Minister himself has shown a lot of leadership in this area, and that's why, you know, he'll get online. I think ANU is publishing a blog for us from the Minister, and as I said, he'll do a media release. So we're about to show you, I think Linda, my colleague's going to come and drive it, AusDev Portal, which is a great new portal. It's going to provide unprecedented access to financial and performance data on the development program at investment levels. So, you know, it draws on things, there's a range of information already out there, but this is the first time you're going to essentially have one landing place where you can go and find a whole breadth of information and depth of information on the development program. Again, thank you very much to sector stakeholders who have done a fantastic job in advising us all along the way. We've been working on this for over a year, and we've had fantastic feedback from the sector about key asks and what should be in this portal. And so we've, you know, it's been incredibly generous engagement from a range of stakeholders in guiding this along the way, and hopefully you'll see a lot of your input reflected today. And I did just want to indulge for a moment and thank my team and broader teams in DFAT who have been involved in this, and actually others in other government departments as well. There's been a range of teams across DFAT working on it. It's been a massive, massive effort. And if you look at this today and think it looked easy, it really wasn't. And, you know, as anyone who knows who's worked on portals, building the data sets and cleansing the data quality and taking systems that weren't necessarily intended to be public-facing systems has been a huge amount. So they've been absolute professionals the whole way along the way. Thank you. All right, so Linda, I think it's over to you. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Linda Roche. I work at DFAT as part of this transparency core team that have been building the portal and working to re-establish IATI reporting. What you'll see here today, this portal is supported by the IATI report, so that's what's behind all of this. Worth pointing out that this is very much our starting point, and we look to be building on it over time. So this is kind of our baseline, and we'll move from there. And we're very keen to get your feedback if there are elements that you think that need to be incorporated in future releases. You'll see up the very top we do have a little feedback tool up there that you can submit your ideas through. So if any of you have looked at any other like-minded portals, you might see some similarities here, and it draws, we've specifically been interested in the UK's portal and have adopted some of their key features there that you might see as we scroll down the page. And it's also been super important to us that it's very accessible and easy to find content. So you can, we have, in this first release, it's a data set of 2022-2023, and that's 913 investments that sits behind that. So there are that many individual investment pages that you can get specific detail on each of those 913 investments. So you can easily navigate to identify and isolate investments based on location, sector group, or policy marker. I will just show you, jump into one here, and they'll all just be listed there. Yeah. It's a bit fussy, this mouse, apologies. Okay, and then as we scroll down, we show our top 10 countries by spend of 2022-23 and by sector group. And they're all click-through. And same for sector groups. For those who are across OECD DAC sector groups, these are identified here at the three-digit code level. So just showing you here. No, maybe not. And okay, let's see what's going on with this mouse. Doesn't want to play very nicely. Maybe I could get, yep, okay, scrolling down the page now. Excellent. We've got this set of 4 feature priority areas that are obviously really important to the international development policy, and wanted to highlight their importance and significance here, because the portal otherwise focuses at the investment level. So this kind of gives a more broad overview of these particular priority areas. So if we jump in to one of them, you'll get more of a broad snapshot. And some helpful links there at the bottom. Work for me, mouse. And then as the portal is driven by IATI data, which is very much focused on their regions, we've just got this snapshot as within DFAT, and for Australia, we're referring to our own regions as we refer them. So we just have this snapshot here of that breakdown of expenditure, as we're often referring to especially expenditure of the Pacific and Southeast Asia. Then scrolling down further, if the mouse will wake up, great. There is a SDG graph here. If you can see the graphic refers to the expenditure coded to those particular SDGs. That is not a click-through at this stage. And that is the overview of the home page. Just scrolling up to the top, going to try and select locations here and just work through the pages. So if we jump into locations, you can either browse by map, and the circles here indicate the proportion of the spend. You can jump into a list view of countries and sort them by alphabetical or largest to smallest, and also you can isolate the IATI regional locations. Just going to jump into map view and let's hone into an investment. Let's look at Indonesia. When you go into a country summary, you'll see a brief overview of our program and priorities. Then we capture the country summary, the expenditure of 22-23, and the budget estimate for 23-24. And I just want to point out that is at a moment in time when we exported the data out, that was what that figure was. That will obviously change throughout the course of the year, but that figure will stay the same on the site. So when you scroll down further, we'll see all of the investments, of which there will be many for Indonesia. So you can, again, many's preference is you can have this card view or a table, and let's show more. And there will be pages of data here. But I'm just going to run down to show you an example investment. Hello, mouse. Please play nicely. Thank you. Nope, that worked temporarily. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so the data that's supported by this comes from our internal investment management system, AidWorks. So it's drawing in the title and a description. And as we scroll down further, if it would, you could see, thank you, that we have a neat little investment summary there. The spend of 22-23, the start date, the planned end date, again, planned end date, noting that's a point in time. As you know, investments will change over time and that will get updated to reflect that when the data set is revised, but probably for the majority of the year it will display that end date. Same goes with this planned estimated investment value, point in time. This was something that many stakeholders were really keen to have included in the portal to get a real sense of the scale of an investment rather than just having the spend for 1 year. This gives you an idea of really how significant an investment is. On the right-hand side, helpful breakdown of sectors also shows the percentage and the dollar figure of those. In locations for this investment, it benefits a number of different locations, so all of the areas of benefit would be displayed there. Policy markers, principal and significant objectives, responsible agency. In this example, it's DFAT, but just to point out that it also captures other government departments as well, so this is a whole of government initiative. Implementing partners, and SDGs, which are coded based upon the sector groups. And where they exist, they will be Tier 2 results, case studies from 2022-23 by indicator. So this has one example here. And then your IMR performance ratings are displayed. And then finally, at the bottom, useful links, which hopefully many examples over time will build on this, will have their investment designs published, as well as any evaluations, and if there are, say, dedicated websites or any other useful tools, they will be listed there as well. So that is an overview of the level of detail you're getting by an investment. If we jump into sector groups, you probably all have your favourite sectors, I'm sure, and want to hone in on that. So at this level, we've got their 2 digits, and then where there are 3 digits underneath them, we'll display them. So you can jump into one. It'll give you an overview of what that sector covers. lost the mouse again, thank you. And then all of the investments, got no movement here. Underneath it will display all of the investments that have been coded to that sector group. They may have a number of various sectors associated with them. What I want to point out though is that whilst this investment is $72 million, the sector component of that is just a proportion of that. So it's not the value of that sector. Okay, that is it for sector groups. If we can jump over to results. I've lost my mouse. Okay, will it across the page? Results. Okay, and scrolling down. Use the force of the room to help me scroll it down the page. Just a neat little graphic which identifies at a higher level results, but we can scroll back up. Thank you. Investments. Okay, so this is identifying where an investment has a Tier 2 indicator. It may be the case that not all investments require to have Tier 2 case studies, so this is going to help you identify those ones that do have them, and you can select, if I could, I would, the indicators, and you can isolate just up above there and down, there we go, specific indicators and see which ones have results there. And hello, okay, that is an example. And then if you were to scroll down the investment, you could see your indicators there. Just gonna go back again. And nope, it's not there. Resources. Some of you will be really interested to find all of the documentation associated with our investments. So this is a really good go-to. You can either, if you are familiar with which investment you're looking at, you can go direct to that investment, scroll to the bottom of the page where the useful links are, that's where you can find them. Or otherwise, if you want to have a broad look, you can identify them all here. And you can select by category. Just want to point out as well that this is only capturing, so this data set is 2022-23, and where there are documentation associated with those investments. So if you're looking for documentation or specifically evaluations for older investments, we have our link here back to our DFAT website where you can find all of those, and you can click on the very helpful spreadsheet there where they're all listed. But at this point in time, it's just the snapshot of the 22-23, and that's what you can find in here. So if we were looking for investment designs, there we go, one further, and apply, all of those would have investment designs that you can go in and take a look at. If we scroll to the bottom of the page, some other really helpful documentation and publications as well. If you want to see our budget portfolio or ODA budget summary and our time series data, just pointing out that that's where you can find all of that consolidated information there. A couple other things to point out. There's maybe some weird DFAT language in here, or DFAT people are not sure what some of this IATI language means, so we've got a glossary in here, and also some frequently asked questions. So if there's something that you're not sure about, maybe take a look at both of those, and also wherever on the page there's hover text as well with a little I, so if you hover over that, it might give you the answer to your question. Now, that's kind of it, a wrap for the portal. My colleagues also wanted me to just point out that the other major component of this initiative was the IATI reporting, and that's all now fully accessible online as well. And there's a range of IATI tools that you can view them through, and this is just one example a snapshot of that. So that's all in there. And that about wraps up my presentation. Back to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. I'll hand back to Joe in a second, but I did just want to say, I mean, today's a really important day for us in launching these two major initiatives, but transparency is really ongoing for us, and, you know, it requires, I think, for all of us, there's cultural shift involved in terms of how we think about transparency and data. We will do ongoing systems work on strengthening our systems, and as Linda said, you know, we're really seeing this as a beta version, as phase one. We want your feedback. We invite positive feedback, but also really constructive feedback as well, and we intend to sort of improve it over time. So thank you.
Fantastic. No. Thank you very much. That was fascinating. My neck hurts a little bit, but I couldn't turn away. So this is a great chance to have a sneak peek. I'm sure you're all going to go off after this and have an in-depth look. But it'd be great to have a bit of a discussion, hear from our discussants on the importance of transparency and what this is going to mean for us as a sector and what some of the other considerations are. So I'll hand over to Dr. Terence Wood, who's a fellow at the Development Policy Centre here at ANU.
All right, so anyhow, once my slides arrive, I am going to speak to you about three things today. First, I'm going to offer you my verdict on the portal. Then I'm going to emphasise why aid transparency is important. And then finally, I'm going to offer some musings about just what it takes or what it might take to prepare a successful aid transparency portal or broader aid transparency endeavour. Let's start with my verdict on the portal. So those of you who've ever read any of my blogs will know that I spend most of my time hectoring aid agencies. And so you'll be bracing yourself now for some textbook academic whinging, I'm sure. The good news, though, is that I've got a, what? Click, there we go. The good news is that I almost know how to use PowerPoint after all these years. The good news is that having seen a presentation of the portal earlier this week, I'm pretty impressed. Rather than being disdainful or frustrated or vexed, I actually like what I see. The portal is easy to use, it's intuitive, it contains an awful lot of information. And not only does it contain a lot of information, but that information is actually remarkably useful if you want to learn more about an individual aid project that's occurring somewhere, or if you want to know more about a set of aid projects in a particular country. I certainly have a few other things in mind that I'd like the portal to do, but this is only version 1, and I'm hopeful that in the future these additional functionalities will be added to the portal. And so next, oh, I have to indicate to you. Oh, okay. Anyhow, so why does aid transparency matter? No, not that way. PowerPoint's gotten harder, or I've gotten older, one or other. So there's a lot of academic theory about why transparency is important in aid giving. I'm going to spare you that theorizing right now, though, and just make 2 simple points. The first of those points, oh, it's a dummy, okay, is that successfully providing or being more transparent with the aid that you're giving has the potential to provide for much more informed debate and constructive criticism of aid in donor countries amongst the people who most plausibly have the power to influence how aid policy is made. But in addition to that, and I think this is an underappreciated point, if you've actually got a readily accessible portal such as the DFAT portal, it also makes it much easier for people in aid recipient countries to get a better sense of the aid that's flowing into their country and therefore to get a better sense perhaps of what their government is or is not doing with it, and then above and beyond that, also to simply understand the aid process in their country better. So successful aid transparency has the potential to enable critique, but it should help us all understand foreign aid, and the aid in this case that Australia gives a little bit better. Away, close. This was so much easier last year. So, having emphasised why I think that aid transparency is itself important, here's just a few of my musings from observing the development of this aid transparency portal and also a similar one in New Zealand about just what an aid transparency portal needs. The first thing it needs, obviously, is political space or political support. No aid agency is going to be able to do much by the way of aid transparency if it doesn't occur in a politically permissive environment. In addition to this, and this is a point that my colleague Cam has emphasised, you aren't going to get a very successful or effective aid portal unless you have buy-in from senior management, in this case senior management in DFAT. There are a lot of different moving parts within aid agencies, and if you want to be transparent about the end product, the aid that you provide, it's kind of odd hearing my own voice coming back at me, Anyhow, if you want to be transparent about the aid that you provide, you actually need all of those moving parts to coordinate and provide information. And they're only ever going to do that if senior management is encouraging them to do that. In addition to that, to get all this up and running and to keep it running, you really need a determined team of staff within the aid agency or within DFAT in this case. And so I'd just like to congratulate at this point all the people within DFAT who have been working to make this happen. I have to admit I was fairly sceptical at the start of this endeavour, but you've done a remarkable job to get everything up and running. You also need time, it takes time. You need resources, I think that's fairly self-evident. You also need a cooperative internal IT infrastructure, by which I mean something within your organisation which will actually provide you with the data that you are then going to put online. And I say that as someone who started working for the New Zealand aid program when everything was once upon a time stored in spreadsheets, right? So, and fairly chaotically stored in spreadsheets. So you really do need something that curates your data internally before you can put it online. And then, of course, building a transparency portal, launching it today, well, that's one thing, but what we'd like to ultimately see is aid transparency normalised within the Australian aid program. And one of the key features that will be required for that to occur is, of course, end user engagement. I think if we want to see aid transparency becoming something that is thoroughly normalised within the aid program, we all have to do our bit now and make sure that we make use of this transparency portal and use it to inform ourselves better about Australian aid and about the nature of Australian aid. There's plenty of scope to use this portal both to enable your personal learning but also in future research work too. And then finally, the one additional ingredient that the portal will need, or that will be needed for transparency to become normalised in the Australian aid program, will be time. Things need to keep working and we need to keep engaging over a sustained period of time. And if that happens, then transparency will become the new norm within the Australian aid program. And I think we have a future to look forward to in which Australia becomes a much more transparent aid donor and indeed becomes one of the benchmarks when it comes to international aid transparency. So with that, I'm going to stop confusing myself with the IT here, and I'm going to sit down and hand over to the next speaker who can enjoy this microphone too.
All right. You've terrified me about using this microphone, but I hope it works for me. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leah Odongo, and I am a humanitarian and development practitioner of over 20 years with experience that spans Australia and overseas development work. And currently I serve as the head of effectiveness at CBM Australia, but I've also just finished my tenure as an elected member of the AAC Code of Conduct, where I served for the past 6 years. So I'm here to provide some insights on the transparency portal from a practitioner's perspective, and I'll draw a lot of my reflections from the AAC Code of Conduct, which I think presents a world-class example of what development ought to be like in terms of a code that governs accountability, transparency, and dignity. I'll start by reflecting on, and I'll just ask for the next slide, please. A couple of code commitments that I know most of us here as members of ACFID are committed to, and just the wonderful opportunity that the portal gives to amplify that which we work towards in terms of greater international development outcomes, as well as more transparency and accountability. I'll start by reflecting on the commitment around investing in locally led aid. I wonder how clear that is. Yeah, I think it's clear, not clear on my end, but that's okay. And this commitment includes a requirement to support local organizations with resources, including funds and time, to lead their own development. And to elaborate this, I'll reflect on, for example, if you think about a CSO leader, a civil society leader, often they will be connected at a very personal level to the issues that they are advocating for. So visibility in terms of grants that are available with regard to similarly motivated issues would really help in terms of ensuring that they partner well and are not restricted by the restrictive requirements that sometimes trying to fit a square into a circle requires. So knowing what's available out there in terms of supporting some of the issues that are important to local communities and local agencies is really important. And the portal will go a long way in enabling a healthy global development ecosystem, providing visibility of funding, opportunities for frontline organizations that we support through direct grant application journeys. Next, I'll go to the second commitment there, which is about optimizing development humanitarian initiatives through effective coordination, collaboration, partnership. And this includes a shared understanding of who is who in the field, who are the various actors, and what are their accountabilities, what are their responsibilities. Something that's often forgotten by most of us actors is just how much pain and angst it causes to communities when we go with millions and millions of focus group discussions trying to understand what the needs are in the community, often in the midst of an emergency. And I believe that if we were better coordinated, if we were using and accessing portals such as this, we would shield and prevent the unintended harm that we often cause. So as a practitioner, I welcome the transparency portal as a step forward in alleviating this pain that some communities have to suffer. Next, I'll talk to the accountability commitment through the ACFID Code of Conduct that is reflected in the Quality Principle 4, and this is around enhancing transparency, accountability, and effectiveness, which underscores, amongst other things, the importance of continuously capturing evidence of change, reflecting on performance, sharing lessons, and promoting a culture of adaptation. And I believe that as we were reflecting or as we were watching the demo of the portal, we could see that that's going to be a possibility with resources available for exactly that purpose. And I have to confess, as I reflect on this accountability principle, most of you would be familiar with Ndambisa Moyo's Dead Aid book. I first read this book when I was relatively new in the sector, and I felt completely devastated by what it was trying to say, because I firmly believe that responsible aid that is delivered with dignity does make a difference. But to a large extent, I actually did resonate with some of the comments of the author of this book, especially in relation to the flaws of a lack of coordination, where we try to implement something that has not been tried and tested elsewhere. So I believe that this portal and all that's available in terms of what's working in different places, resources, evaluations, will actually enable us to be better and more responsible actors in the work that we seek to do and in ensuring that we deliver the outcomes that we desire. Next, I'll talk to another quality principle that is captured in the AAC Code of Conduct, Quality Principle 7, and this relates to accountable, transparent, and responsible governance, which includes, among other things, making information about our work available to all stakeholders. So these are things that we are already committed to. And my reflections here are really linked to the fact that the portal amplifies what we are already doing so that we can do better. It is a firm commitment of our commitment as the Australian ANGO and the Australian sector that is committed to development overseas to remain transparent, to remain good stewards of the funds that are given to us. And reflecting on this particular code, please allow me to share a story of a gentleman, a farmer that I interacted with the very first time I moved to Australia 10 years ago, coming from the field and mostly accustomed to interacting with donations through a budget. I had never seen the face of the donation. And this gentleman would come with an envelope and cash in hand, and he had a strong conviction that he was making a difference in someone's life. And he said, I've done this for 10 years, and I know that it's making a difference in someone's life. So when it comes to being accountable and transparent and providing all information about our work, I believe that this is a step forward in the right direction to enabling this gentleman, who I'll call John for the time being, but who also represents millions of other donors here in Australia who have entrusted us with their support and money, hard-earned money. I'm delighted that through the initiatives of the AAC Code of Conduct and this newly launched portal, the public at large can know that we honor their trust and that we are committed in operating in a transparent way. And lastly, just further insights regarding the portal and what the portal is seeking to achieve. I'll reflect on the commitment around acquiring, managing, and reporting on resources ethically and responsibly, which includes, amongst other things, irreproachable management and application of donor funds, and transparent, easily comparable financial reporting and annual reports. And this means that we share, through the AAC Code of Conduct commitment, which I believe most of us are familiar with, information on the breadth of stakeholder relationships that we engage with, and also have some clear, measurable goals of what we are trying to achieve as a sector, as well as a balanced disclosure of both the positive and the negative things that are not happening, and adaptation to challenge. I believe that this is exactly what the portal is seeking to do, and I'm really delighted as a practitioner in the sector that we are a step further in ensuring that this commitment that we hold as sector practitioners will continue to be advanced through the portal. I'll pause there. I had 5 minutes to present, but I'm really looking forward to the panel discussions and any questions that may come through. Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. There's 2 world firsts there. First, access to the portal that's just been launched. And the first time, I believe, Terence has been unequivocally positive about an initiative of the Australian Aid Program. So you have borne witness. But we are aware that this is phase 1. So phase 1 looks very impressive. It's new and shiny. We all get to have a play around. So I guess my first question to the panel is, thinking ahead now into phase 2 and beyond, what are some of the features of this portal going forward that you most look forward to seeing? So we might start with you, Terence.
So this is working? Yes. Okay. For me, and this perhaps reflects my own preoccupations, what I would like to see is readily downloadable data, and not just in an XML format, but CSV, Excel, something that a normal person can use. And I would also like to see all the data in one place, so not just the IATI data, but also if you could couple that with data such as the IMR data, if that was all in one data file, that would make analysis for people like me much, much easier. The other thing, obviously, is time series data. So we've got 1 year's data right now. Presumably, as we go forward, the data set will get larger and larger with each additional year. So for me personally, that's what I'd like to see.
More and more data. Thanks, Terence. Leah.
Thank you for that question. Is it working? Okay, what I'd really like to see in the future, in which I think is possible, is some real-time data on what's available. I've gone through some of the Q&As regarding what's possible with the portal at this stage, and I know that real-time data is not possible at this stage, but I do believe that that is really critical in terms of adjusting and making changes where possible, aligning ourselves to the rapid dynamic context in which we work, and enabling research in real time in terms of what's working rather than waiting over a long period of time before we know whether some approach is working out or is impactful. So that's the first thing on my wish list. I'm also hoping that we'll be able to dissect the data in such a way that we are able to assess the intersectionalities of experiences of the people that we are reaching out. I hope that there will be opportunities to further manipulate once we have more information on the portal to manipulate and interpret vast data sets, because we all understand that different disadvantages impact different people differently, and at some point there's an intersectionality of these disadvantages, so that we're not looking at data at a linear and one vision way, but looking at how it interacts with different aspects so that we can do better as a sector.
Thanks, Leah. And maybe, Kath, you can tell us, what does the future hold for the portal, and how can mortal beings get involved and have a say?
Great, yeah, thanks. Well, firstly, to say taking that on board, the things that you've asked for today are sort of on our list, and we're thinking about how we might deliver that in the future. How you can get involved, couldn't agree more with Terence's point about end user engagement. It's a lot of resources has gone into recommencing the IATI reporting and then using that file to build the portal, and so we really want to be sure that we're meeting the needs of end users, and so we'll be tracking all the metrics and sort of seeing how it's used, where it's being used. Linda, I think, pointed out there is a feedback form online, so use it. We'll certainly be monitoring that, and we have a lot of engagement with a lot of the partners in the room and online today. I think we'll sort of think about how we use those forums to use feedback loops. So yeah, all of that is sort of on the agenda for ahead. There's trade-offs in everything. There's lots of things we would like to deliver, but they all have a resource cost. So that's why I think really getting feedback from stakeholders about how they're using it is important. We're particularly keen to see how it's used in our partner countries, because that accountability to our partners, be they government or civil society partners or others, is really important. So I think that's really important, and just watch this space. We'll see what we can deliver next. In terms of timing, we'll probably do some minor adjustments over the coming months. Particularly, please do tell us if you find anything that's not working or you think might be incorrect or problematic, and then at some point we'll probably do whatever comes after beta, delta, is it? Is that even a term? We'll do a more major update.
Right, so I guess just thinking a bit more broadly now about the end user, how is this data going to be used? How is this portal going to remain alive with the kinds of information that people want to see? And then, so what? What's going to happen with that information? How is it going to drive behaviour change? Leah, you touched on coordination, and I think the prospects of better coordination when a range of actors have better access to information about what a bunch of other actors are doing in the sector, that has a lot of potential. So I guess I'm interested to hear from the panel, what kind of behaviour change do you hope to see as a result of more transparent access to information? But also, what behaviour change is needed in the sector to continue to grow the portal and have more and more types of information available? So perhaps we'll start with you, Kath.
Sure. I think that behavioural change is really important, and I sort of did mention that earlier, the cultural change. We've, even within, DFAT, we have invested a lot in taking teams along with us and getting comfortable with something that, obviously government's always transparent to a point, but, this is really significant. So I think in behavioural change, we look internally, and so we have sort of a governance mechanisms in place to help drive that behavioural change, and I see as sort of senior leaders as being a really strong part of that, really modelling expectations and leading by example and setting that culture. And then in behavioural change, I often look at the our international development policy on the commitments under it, and I think rarely think of those as government commitments. I look at them as a commitment by the government along with all of the other stakeholders involved in it, and so I would like that behavioural change to sort of be reflected in the way we all collectively engage on the development program and engage with our partners. And I'm quite keen to hear, I think we're having a discussion on the policy tomorrow and its implementation, and see how a lot of our partners are taking those behaviours and implementing them. And then, sorry, just to pick up one other point, I should say in terms of thinking about the future, we've talked a lot about ODA in the portal, which is a very specific, defined way of delivering development programs, as set by international standards. But I actually think there is so much contribution to development that sits beyond ODA, and so maybe that's something we can think about in behaviours, about how we get better at capturing the breadth of our engagement and our development partnerships in the region beyond, or ODA and beyond. Thanks.
Thanks, Kath. How about you, Terence?
I'd just like to emphasise the importance of everyone in the room trying to use the portal to become better informed about aid, and perhaps for those of you who are thinking about research and researching foreign aid, to make as much use of the portal as you possibly can. I've been guilty about talking about data a lot, but the portal can be very useful in other ways too. So if you've got interest in a particular project or a particular set of projects in a country, you can use the portal as a really good starting point for your own research journey. You can find out who all the implementing partners are on a project, how much money has been spent on a project, whether DFAT thinks the project is succeeding or not, and then you can use that to complement your own work. And I'd say that would be true be it if you're a researcher, a journalist, or perhaps someone living in an affected community. So I'd just like to encourage people to use the portal as much as possible, even if, unlike me, you're not entirely fixated on data.
Leah.
Yeah, well, in terms of behavior change as a result of the portal, that I'm keen to see is more robust and vibrant discourses from the various stakeholders in the sector, both in Australia, so that we are holding each other accountable. And that will only be possible if we use the portal and we find out what's available and what can we hold each other accountable for. I'm also hoping to see this level of vibrancy, not just in Australia, but overseas with our partners, holding us more accountable to what we commit to say because of the level of transparency. And of course, I'm hoping that one of the things I talked to earlier around collaboration, coordination, playing our part as key actors in the sector in terms of utilizing this so that we reduce the burden that we impose on our partners overseas, but also on the communities that we serve by not making use of available resources to know who is doing what where, to inform what we support and the designs that we support.
All right, I've got one more question for the panel before we open it up, and I'm going to become a little bit of a naysayer about transparency and challenge you a little bit on what are some of the factors that maybe push against the principle of transparency when it comes to ODA. Just a couple of examples. I guess one factor is that implementation is hard. As a lot of people in this room probably know, you don't always achieve what you think you're going to achieve, and there are failures, and there are a lot of times when things don't work out as planned. So is transparency potentially a factor against people being frank and fearless in admitting to failures, admitting to mistakes, admitting to where things have not gone right? And isn't that an essential ingredient for us to learn and adapt? And I think as part of this broader context, not everyone is a fan of ODA, so potentially this opens us up to a lot of naysayers out there, maybe a lot of bots that are going to put out a lot of rubbish on social media about Project X and Project Y and how taxpayer money is being misspent all over the place. So does this transparency actually have the potential to turn a lot more people against ODA than would otherwise be the case? I'll start with you, Terence.
I think there are people out there who would probably take the opportunity to try and achieve that goal. I can think of certain Australian newspapers that might engage in that sort of behaviour, but I actually think you'd be surprised. I mean, if you look at the examples of other countries that have put up transparency portals, they do not seem to have led to major backlashes. There are always going to be haters or critics of aid, and they're always going to be looking for examples or opportunities to criticise. I don't actually think portals are going to leave the aid program that much more vulnerable, at least to bad faith criticism. Obviously, they may empower people like me to engage in good faith criticism, but that's a story for another day, actually tomorrow as it happens.
Sure. That's a really good question, Joe. In terms of some of the pushbacks to transparency, I guess you've already talked to it, the fact that there are often failures with development. But I also believe that no failure is useless if we learn something from it. And I think we need to get away from the fear of reporting failures, but also be less or more accommodating of failure, because that's the process through which we learn. And the other pushback is that development takes time, and that's something that we don't often reflect on. That we'll have a project that runs for 5 years with very ambitious targets and goals and objectives that we want to achieve through it. And often it takes more than 5 years when you're dealing with social behavioral changes and stuff like that. And that's okay. I guess the lesson that we can take from that is to actually be more realistic with our designs, to be more realistic with the targets that we set for ourselves. In terms of this being an invitation for people who are just natural haters, and I'll reflect on my time at the AAC Code of Conduct Committee, and it was really encouraging to see people who take their time to audit organizations' financial reports and make complaints about them. And it was an opportunity for us to build our Q&As. Often it was because something was not understood as to what the expectation is. So I believe that we can take this as part of the journey of educating ourselves, educating other people. But the more we get these questions and critiques, the more we also perfect what we are doing. So I'd say let's welcome them. Probably receive a lot more initially, but as we get clearer, as we answer more questions, as we live truthfully to our commitment to transparency, we'll get into that culture that Terence talked about, a culture that invites and encourages transparency.
Right, last word, Kath.
Yeah, well, maybe just picking up on Leah's point there about that culture. We were very conscious during developing these products that it is not any one culture. This is a commitment that's been made by the government, but we're working with lots of partner governments, we're working with lots of delivery partners, and so we were very careful about sort of making assumptions about, we think this is a public good, but not everyone else's. So that's been, just working to make sure that we're all comfortable comfortable with what we're publishing and have at least some sort of shared view of why this is sort of a public good. And I think your point about some of the skeptics out there. I mean, yes, there are the haters, but I think there is a very, very valid sector that might be a little bit skeptical about aid, and maybe this can be weaponised a bit, having a little more out there. But I think, you know, we need to be accountable to, particularly to the Australian public, you know, who are funding the aid program. And I think you counter that scepticism with just really strong evidence about what the taxpayers' funds are delivering, both in terms of delivering for the region and delivering in our national interest. And that's part of a sort of a long-term endeavour as well, I think. So I actually see it as potentially quite a positive tool in that respect.
All right, thank you. I can feel this room is heaving with questions. So we have some mics in the room if you want to put your hand up if you have a question, and please introduce yourself and keep it short. Just over here, thank you.
Hello. Okay, I've got it. Firstly, congratulations. I think the aid portal is a massive achievement, but I think probably what went under the radar, which is more of an achievement, is the Australian government's recommitment to EARTI. So I'm David from Catalpa. We actually worked on the EARTI data model and applying it to Myanmar. And so there's an element of being a better development partner as well, as countries' aid information management systems rely on that EARTI data standard. So firstly, congratulations to that. Now, one of I remember speaking to someone who wrote that standard, and he said, you know, data is for machines, information is for people. And sometimes the EARTI data standard it's not human in some ways. And it doesn't meet people's expectations. And probably one of the main ones is around the investment level information. So when you're dealing with country partners or programs, often people are looking for activity-based information. And as the development program, as we start moving to larger platforms and facilities, that transparency down at the implementation level, I think in EARTI it's your extending partner or implementing partner in that methodology. And so trying to get access to that information seems like that the last mile. And so I was just wondering how you're looking at tackling that element about sort of one, responding to the humanness of the need for information and that demand for information below the investment, which is around activity-based information. Okay.
Yeah, sure, happy to take it. And firstly, thank you for acknowledging the IARTI work that went into it, because that really is the foundation for the portal, and it was a massive amount of work, and Lisa and other colleagues in the room were really fundamental in that. And as I kept terrifying the team by saying, is the portal lives and dies on the IARTI file, and if we don't get that right, it won't work. So yeah, it's an interesting way you describe it about, you know, sort of information being for humans. I think I'm in the IARTI file, and Terence would sympathise, is probably the robot side of it, and the portal is the human side of it. This is our attempt to make it something more accessible. And we do, you know, we have spoken a lot about financial data and performance data, but I really think the portal is key to telling a story. And over time, I think maybe it will grow and you'll sort of see that richness there. In terms of activity level, I think that is a tricky one. The IARTI file was built on our internal aid management system, AidWorks, which is really the focus is at that investment level, and most of the way we partner with other governments and things, the focus really is at that investment level, and we design at an investment level, we evaluate at an investment level. It would certainly be a hugely ambitious project to extend much to activity level, because that wouldn't be something where you change the portal, it would be changing DFAT's entire aid management system. So there's probably colleagues in the room from that area that manages it and are just going, but you know, the portal isn't everything for that, and we can think about as part of this transparency sort of commitment. As I said earlier, it's a long-term commitment. So how do we start providing more at that activity level, and yeah, just think about how we can satisfy that demand. Thanks.
All right, just over here.
Thank you. Grace Stanhope from the Lowy Institute. I'm one of the data monkeys that does the aid maps, so this is really great to see. I have a question around kind of that beyond ODA question. I was wondering how things like blended finance will be accounted for. I know we've started using the ODA equivalent of things like the AIFFP loans in the federal budget. Would things like that be appearing on this portal, and how will they sort of be accounted for? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully all reflected. So as you say, with AIFFP, with the below cost lending component of that, we're reflecting it in the budget papers, and essentially everything down to every dollar that is that was transacted in 22-23 is reflected in the portal. So you will see that there, and as that portfolio grows, I mean, there's people that are more expert in the room, but essentially the below cost lending is reflected at the time of disbursement, so it won't sort of be over the life of the loan as a disbursement. And sorry, the second question was on the blended finance. I think how it will work there, it depends a little bit on the modality of the blended finance, but typically you would see the DFAT ODA contribution to that financing platform. So Australian Development Investments is obviously the flagship, one of the flagships, blended finance. So you would see our component there. The portal itself wouldn't show the money that we crowded in from the private sector, but the performance reporting attached to it and the narrative hopefully would. So hopefully that answers your questions. And I should say, as I acknowledged at the beginning, we're sort of standing on the shoulders of those who went before us, and just wanted to specifically acknowledge that sort of the aid tracker and Lowy's work on the aid map has been incredibly instrumental in getting this up and running. So thank you.
All right, any other questions in the room? One up the back there.
To show you how some of that direct financing that goes to government is spent. I mean, we hold our civil servants to account through our Auditor General's office, and they're very, very poorly paid compared to our elite development workers in our countries. And for anyone to say implementation is difficult, I'd say that's a bit of a cop-out, because you do get paid the biggest salaries in most of our Pacific countries compared to civil servants who spend our budgets. So the question is, in terms of, say, for instance, DFED funding going to, or MFED funding going to the Fijian government, would the aid transparency portal show us how our governments are using your money and what they're doing and how effectively?
Thanks. That's a question I can probably answer in part. When you search on there and see who the implementing partners are, or the governments that we're working with in countries are mostly listed across every investment, because most of them will be delivered through government. But where you would see more specifically where we're working directly with the government and implementing through government systems, that will be reported on the portal as going into the government system. So you'd be aware, as part of our commitment to locally led development, we're trying to make greater use of government systems, and so sometimes that will include direct financing into central budgets. The portal wouldn't then show you sort of where the dollars go after that, but there are other ways that, there's reporting against those investments that might provide a bit more of that granularity. But you're right, that accountability, I think it comes back to telling what impact we're getting for the investment. So the portal won't be able to provide sort of that level of detail of the different, line items and things, but you'll certainly get a sense of delivery partners and which investments are working with whom. Thanks.
All right. We are going to wrap up now. I think we are all busy going back to our desk to play around on the portal after this. And in about a year's time for the next conference, I think we're going to see a whole different debate because we'll be so well informed about every investment out there. So big thanks to DFAT for launching the portal here today, and to Terence and Leah.
Thanks to Joe and the panel for kicking us off today and finding out where all the little hiccups in the IT and AV were. It's very useful. We've got a break now for afternoon tea, and then we've got 2 launch sessions after afternoon tea before another one back here. So, yeah, please grab some afternoon tea, meet and greet. Thanks.